It's an astonishing day in the world of Magic the Gathering. The president of Wizards of the Coast has just quit her job, leaving the company scrambling to find a replacement. And this is going to have a really negative impact on Magic the Gathering and also D&D going forwards.
Magic.
I am a wizard!
History.
I'm an old wizard!
The Magic Historian.
My bones hurt. Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. My friends, I hope the day finds you well because we have gathered to talk about a very big situation. Cynthia Williams, the person in charge, the president of Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro Gaming, has just tendered her resignation. Now, I just want to let you guys know that I am currently very under the weather. This news was big enough that I felt I needed to come out and cover it, but my voice and my energy levels mean that I'm going to have to basically do this all in one go. If I make any kind of mistakes, we're just going to keep moving on forwards, all right? So I have the note here, a whole list of things that are going on specifically. We're going to talk about her quitting, basically her legacy, what she's been responsible for, while she was at Wizards, and then we'll talk about the possible reasons, and we'll wrap up by talking about what this means for both Magic the Gathering and, as a side note, for Dungeons and Dragons as well, okay? So let's start out by taking a look at the 8K form that was filed with the SEC. Look at this insanity. There are so many lines and words on this thing, but ultimately it's really just saying Cynthia Williams is quitting. She's going to be done on April 26th. And at this point, Wizards of the Coast has not found a replacement. So I don't know specifically how it works in this regard when somebody steps down, if they stick around to help out in a consulting capacity, like if she'll still be working for Wizards of the Coast, but just won't be considered the president of Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro Gaming, because remember, that was her title. Now, she started this basically back in February of 2022. February 21st was when she came on board. She gave notice of her intent to resign Monday, right? So just a couple of days ago. And like I said, that comes into effect on April 26th. Now, this is all happening 1 week before the first quarter earnings announcement for 2024. And I wouldn't be surprised if the numbers that they show with that announcement are terrible, because Markov Manor got one of the poorest receptions of any Magic set, and Wizards of the Coast has been struggling to make those dollars. Now, she became the president of Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro Gaming after coming over from working on Microsoft's gaming division, right? So she didn't specifically have experience in the card game world, but Wizards of the Coast more and more obviously has been looking to push out in different digital ways with mobile games. Arena's obviously a big offering as well. So it makes sense why they brought her in. I want to go over a number of really hot button issues that happened under her leadership, right? First of all, we have smaller things like the Aftermath sets, right? This is all stuff that was created under her guidance, and when you look at it, the Aftermath sets are abject failures. The first Aftermath set, people went, nope, we don't want that, to the point where Wizards went, oh, what are we going to do with the Thunder Junction set that we have an Aftermath for? And they shoved that into the main set as the big score. So they basically had to swallow their pride and swallow the set into another one. We also have the fact that under her guidance, Magic the Gathering has had the worst card quality ever. You have Magic 30 came out during her tenure as well. Magic 30 being the biggest debacle in Magic the Gathering history as far as I'm concerned, where they had to walk the product back and go, oh, it's just no longer available for sale, not sold out, right? We all know how the Magic 30 thing went. There's also that Pinkerton situation where they went, wait, what? You bought cards and were given the wrong stuff and now you have it? We're going to send thugs out to take this stuff back from you. So you have all that going on, but you have to understand that it wasn't just Magic the Gathering that she was doing this with. She also specifically said that Dungeons and Dragons is under monetized, and she wanted to unlock recurrent spending like you see in current era video games, right? And obviously that's a huge red flag, because that's just straight up, how do we turn D&D players into constantly paying us players? And we saw that with the open gaming license fiasco, which, if you thought the Magic 30 thing was insane, if you were on the D&D side of things, the D&D players forced Wizards of the Coast to their knees and made them retract everything. Where Wizards of the Coast went, you know what? We're going to make people pay to use this open license. We used to just say, hey, you can make whatever you want and you can monetize it. And then they came in and said, no. You know what? Now we get a cut. You have to pay us for all of this stuff. And so the D&D community pushed back, and then Wizards of the Coast came back again with a different iteration of the open gaming license, and they tried to use different boogeymen, like, oh, there's hateful people out there, you need to let us do this so we can stop the hateful people. But you notice how after the OGL thing fell apart, they never talked about these hateful people they were trying to stop ever again. So it was just basic insanity, where they tried to say, look, man, we weren't trying to take money from the players. This is just to stop Facebook from like stealing our content, bro, for real. And so eventually they just went, okay, we surrender. You know what? Because D&D players started canceling their monthly subscriptions to the gaming. So basically, Wizards had a bunch of people who were paying monthly for Dungeons and Dragons. Talking about how they want to unlock recurrent spending, she actually managed to do the opposite, because the open gaming license and the changes they tried to make were not made in consultation with the players or even regular level employees at Wizards of the Coast. It was high level management and lawyers that went into the room and were like, okay, how do we take these guys cheddar? How do we hose them? How do we get the most money? And that blew up in their face horrendously, to the point where they had to just completely admit surrender and go, forget it, you know what, we're going to make it all free. So in that regard, Cynthia's there going, we got to pull more money out of Dungeons and Dragons, but instead they ended up losing revenue from D&D. So you have the biggest fiasco in Magic's history with Magic 30, the biggest fiasco in D&D's history with the OGL, and that's all under her auspices when she was in charge, right? So this is not exactly what I would call a track record of success. Now, let's be fair as well. Basically, what's been going on with Wizards of the Coast is there has been a push to extract as much money as possible from Magic for a number of years. Chris C., the man who's actually in charge of Hasbro now, used to have Cynthia's job. He used to be the one in charge of Wizards of the Coast. And he had the luck of being somebody who walked in where there was a lot of ways to exploit what was going on with Magic the Gathering. The increasing of prices with master sets, the extraction of value from the secondary market with secret layers. All of that sort of thing. So he got to basically go to Hasbro, look, man, over the next 5 years, gonna double the money. And he managed to pull it off, which made him look like a golden boy. And that's what actually moved him up into being in charge of Hasbro, because they went, wait, the only part of us that's making any money is Wizards of the Coast, and you just doubled their profit. Okay, clearly we'll give you the wheel and you can steer this ship. So he brought in Cynthia and basically goes, you have 3 years to get a 50% increase in profits. And that's the same thing. 5 years doubling it, or 3 years, like 50% increase, is roughly the same thing. But basically he had this gigantic juicy orange and he squeezed the crap out of it, and then he tossed her what was left and go, you got to get as much juice as I did out of it, right? So like in one way, what is she supposed to do? How are you even supposed to find that money? So you have a situation where you have the earnings are on the downswing at this point. Wizards of the Coast isn't doing the greatest, right? Their sales are flagging. Yes, they have had a bunch of banger situations, like the Lord of the Rings sold quite well, but even the Lord of the Rings selling quite well didn't do that much to help balance out all the losses that Hasbro has been eating. They sold their entertainment division, and it was, I can't remember the exact numbers, but it's like $1 billion or more in loss just on that. So she's in charge of this company that is the oxygen tank for the dying old man that is Hasbro, right? And they're just like, more oxygen, more oxygen. So you got a situation where the money is heading downwards, and so she's walking. Now, we don't know exactly why, because no reason has been given, but the fact that Wizards of the Coast doesn't have a replacement lined up says to me that this wasn't Wizards of the Coast going, let's get rid of her. Because if they did, they would want to have some strong choice to bring forward to go, Cynthia Williams is leaving us, but we have so-and-so coming on board, and we look forward to their strong hand at the wheel and the vision they have to take us into the new level of success or whatever it's going to be. But instead, the statement Wizards put out was your whole, we really value the time that Cynthia Williams was with us, and we wish her the best in the future, all that kind of thing. Basically, very normalized corporate sort of blah, 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 blah nonsense, right? Now, when it comes to the reasons that Cynthia will be leaving, we obviously just talked about the fact that it's probably not Wizards of the Coast pushing her out the door. They haven't found somebody to replace her. So, I have a number of different situations. I mean, first of all, let's acknowledge that it could just be that she's made enough money in her life being a high-level executive that she's full on retiring, right? But I don't know, man. I think that's probably not the case. So if that's not what's going on, it could be a situation where she's looking at it going, yo, this is a sinking ship. And for the last couple of years, I can point to the stuff and go, look how well Lord of the Rings did and whatever, and take credit for that. But the longer she stays on while the numbers are tumbling, the worse it makes her look as a president who's in charge of a company. So she might have been eyeing the door already. It might have reached the point where her stocks have vested to the point where she can actually take enough money to wander out the door. If you don't know how it works with these high-level executives, a lot of their compensation package comes in the form of actual stock for the company they work for. So here's your stock, but here's the deal. You can't sell it until you've been here for 2 years, for example. And that amount can vary. And they do keep offering more stock, and they'll be like extended date outwards. So even if she is choosing to sell because she's vested, like, oh, I've waited long enough, there could be a situation where some of her stock is still not vested and she might be leaving some of that on the table. But if Wizards of the Coast looks so ugly for the future that it's not worth having that black mark on your career, she might just be eating the cash loss to jump out. And speaking of cash, it might actually be something completely different. She might be like poached, essentially. So you have people coming in and going, wait a minute. Hasbro is failing miserably. Wizards of the Coast is their only lifeline. We want the person in charge of Wizards of the Coast. They're not going to be able to get, obviously, the CEO of Hasbro, right? And they might not even realize that he's the one who did most of this, and Cynthia's just kind of following the plan that he set up in the first place. But ultimately, what could happen is another corporation might have looked at the situation and said, hey, why don't we get her? Why don't we offer her more money than Wizards of the Coast is paying her, and then we'll bring her on over. So she might end up going and working for another company. She might already have that all sorted out, right? It's only a 2-week notice period. Sometimes when people leave companies, they go, I'm going to give them 3 months, I'm going to give them 6 months, or I'm going to give them until they get a replacement. But this, I wouldn't say this isn't normal, because a lot of the time, 2 weeks notice is kind of corporate normal, but at the same time, that might not be exactly what's going down. So you have this situation where Cynthia has decided to depart Wizards of the Coast overall. This affects Magic and D&D going forwards, because you have to understand, like I said, Chris C. was the guy in charge of Wizards of the Coast. And as far as I'm concerned, he's the man who's done the most damage to the game in the shortest amount of time. The 5 years that he was in charge of Wizards of the Coast saw us get increasingly worse card quality. And speaking of which, when they produced Magic 30, it was produced with the same poor standards. They wanted $1,000 a booster box for 4 packs, and it was produced to the same poor quality standards of all the other stuff we're seeing where the edges are all nicked up. And actually, that's been getting progressively worse. Under Cynthia's watch, the card quality has gotten to be there. I've never seen it worse. The cards are gritty, like there's sandpaper on them. The edges are completely janked. And if you're wondering why you keep getting Magic cards and all the edges are white and crappy like that, the reason is they're just using dull blades at the printer. They're not stopping enough to sharpen the blades and give a good trim, because ultimately what they learned under Chris C's watch when he was the one in charge of Wizards is that apparently you can just sell people poor quality cards. In the ancient days, Wizards of the Coast actually had such a high standard for their product that if cards weren't good enough, they would send them off to be burned and do an entire new printing. That's how Summer Magic came to be. They looked at the stuff and went, this is terrible. We have to destroy this. But in the current era, it doesn't matter how bad the card quality is. They just shove it on us. And if you contact customer service, they just go, That's the standard we print our cards to now. Roller lines, beat up edges, all of that. And the reason for that is because Wizards makes more money. They don't have to spend as much money on quality assurance. And let's be real as well, they can't keep up with the breakneck pace of making all these sets, right? Like we're getting a break in May where there's not going to be a new Magic set. But the only reason that that is happening is because Wizards of the Coast messed up with the Aftermath sets and they had to fold that whole Thunder Junction Aftermath set into the main set. Otherwise, it would be just unending product. So you have this diminishing return situation where you can only make so many cuts, and the cuts have been made. Maybe Cynthia looked at the situation and said, you know what? There's no way to increase production any further that I can see where it's not going to become nightmarish, and the card quality is already terrible. So maybe when she looked at the internals, she said, I got to get out of here. I'm done with this. This is just going to be worse from now on. Because Wizards is moving into some really rough territory. If you want a little bit of hope, I'll let you know this. Markov Manor is worse than Thunder Junction. The response to Thunder Junction from consumers actually purchasing products has been stronger than Markov Manor. So it's kind of funny, actually. I did a live stream yesterday where it was called A Brighter Future, where I'm talking about how I think things might be getting a bit better for Magic the Gathering. And then obviously the very next day we find out that the CEO of Wizards is quitting. So if you not CEO, sorry, president. So if you want to see that live stream where I'm talking about a more positive future for Magic, I'll leave the link to that at the end of the stream. And then, well, now we're going to talk about how the future for Magic is probably going to be more bleak because of this departure. I can't see how this is going to be a positive. I know there are people out there who are hoping maybe the next person who takes over Wizards of the Coast will genuinely care about the game. But even if they do, you got to understand, even if somebody who genuinely cared about Magic somehow mysteriously made it to the position of being president of Wizards of the Coast, that's still not going to be enough because they have to answer to Hasbro, right? Chris C., the guy who just spent 5 years pillaging Magic, doesn't care about us and literally put Cynthia William in charge of it, who did, let's get him with the Pinkertons and all this kind of stuff. So you have a situation where whoever is picked is going to basically need to march in lockstep with what Chris's vision for Hasbro is. And the vision for Hasbro is currently, Wizards of the Coast is our only cash cow. It has insanely high margins where they can make 60% profit on these products, which is absurd for corporate stuff, right? So basically, he looks at that and goes, not only is this money for Wizards, but the money we make from Wizards is to start new initiatives for Hasbro. It's to pay off all our debts. It's this insane delusional, and speaking of delusion, you should see the one interview he did recently where he's talking about, oh, we have 10,000 different LGSs and they're all super happy with our products and everybody's doing great. And 100 years from now, Hasbro's going to be celebrating our new strategy. And it's just like, wait, what are you talking about? LGSs have been backing off of Magic hardcore ever since Markov Manor tanked so badly. Thunder Junction will instill a little bit more trust, but ultimately, what's going to probably happen with the new person who comes in to be in charge of Wizards of the Coast? Think about it. You just get hired to start, I'm in charge. I'm the new president of Wizards of the Coast. Well, Chris C's your boss. He's the guy you got to make happy. How do you do that? You get as much money as possible from Wizards of the Coast. But you can't just do what was already being done because that's not working. That's not bringing enough. That means you've got to shake it up. You've got to take new initiatives, right? And this person's starting from square one. They weren't there for 2 years as Cynthia was. Oh, I've done this and I've done this and Lord of the Rings succeeded. They're walking in when Magic is at its worst spot it's ever been. And their job is to extract as much money as humanly possible from us, the players, for their real customers, the shareholders. So you end up with a scenario where the new president is probably going to come in with crazy new policies. Understand that these people just do this insane stuff and see what happens. They didn't sit down and go, hey, Magic 30 might be a bad idea. They just ran with it. We're going to do $1,000 reserve list reprints, but tongue-in-cheek, they're not actually, it's not like we reprinted the reserve list because we did gold backs on the card. Wait a minute. Why are a bunch of people selling their collections and just buying proxies? Oh no, we accidentally just endorsed proxies so hard. That was the side effect of Magic 30. And if that wasn't enough on the D&D side, because they did the OGL thing, guess what? You got a bunch of D&D players moving on to other games. Paizo was loving it. They're like, oh, hey, come on over to Pathfinder. Stuff is booming. All kinds of other RPGs made a bunch of bank off of these mistakes. But the new CEO's not going to care about any of that. They're not going to look at it and go, I don't want to make those mistakes. They're just going to look at it and go, where can I get the money? So I fully expect that the reserve list is a place where there's a ton of money. You walk in the CEO and you go, or as the president, and then you go, okay, where are we going to extract our money from, friends? Well, we're pulling money from the secondary market, but we're getting further and further diminishing returns from that because there's only so much to milk, and we're doing 14 different kinds of reprints into sets. Thunder Junction, for example, literally has 6 different expansion symbols in one set, right? It's like, it's absolute madness. So you walk into this and you go, okay, so we're doing this. Oh, they pulled back on Magic 30 and the reserve list stuff. Well, that's where all the money is. So I fully expect that going forwards, they're going to make another run at the reserve list, and they're going to have to find other ways to like boost the numbers, which if you can't drop card quality anymore, right? If we're literally at the point where how can card quality get any worse? And I don't, you know what, man, bite my tongue here, because this might turn out to be a scenario where the card quality is going to get worse. And a year from now, I'm going to be like, remember the Williams era where cards weren't like wobbly like bacon and actually the words didn't fall off of them? Like I don't know how it could get worse, but I mean, I'm cynical enough to understand that it absolutely could get worse. So we've got this scenario where they're going to come along and it's like, if you can't drop card quality, you have to either up production. And how do you do that? Didn't we get like 90 secret layers in 1 year? It felt like I can't even keep track. They do these super drops. The last super drop was half Universes Beyond, right? And going forwards, they're saying 2/3, we'll get there. 1/3 of sets each year are going to be Universe Beyond. Of the 6 tentpole releases, it's crazy. It used to be like 3 releases a year, and they would develop entire blocks, and they'd have story and all this stuff. But anyways, you've got your 6 sets in a year. 2 are Universes Beyond. Universe Beyond have huge licensing fees. So they're faced with the proposition of, well, this is how we're bringing people in, this is how we're making money, but we're also giving away a bunch of money. So they're probably going to lean more into their own properties, because Hasbro owns like G.I. Joe, Transformers, all that kind of stuff. So they're probably going to try and do Universes Beyond like that. But if those were super appealing to people and they thought those were going to be huge money makers, they would have already done that, right? They put the Transformers into Brothers War, but that's about it. So I don't think they see a lot of money in their own properties for this Universe Beyond stuff. So you look at it and go, okay, so there's not much room to actually add in more product. Where do you get the money? Ever spiraling prices upwards, right? We've already seen this effect where they brought in the set boosters to go, we're pushing the price of booster packs up. And then after set boosters cannibalized draft boosters, they went, oh man, we got a bunch of draft booster product. We got to move that. And then they changed standard to 3 years. So they literally made standard a much worse format in service of trying to sell draft boxes. And then after that, they went, okay, it's still not working. We'll bring in play boxes, which is supposed to be the best of set and draft boxes. But the problem is it really messes up limited. Play boosters, and we're going to see this especially with Thunder Junction, have amped up the power of limited formats and taken away a lot of the skill and turned it more into like super luck factor, which is not what people who play limited want. So you have this situation where when they brought out the play boosters, they pushed the price up. In Canada, the price of Magic went up by 30%. They were already inching up the price of booster boxes by like $5-10 a set, but then all of a sudden with play boosters, they just went boom, we're cranking it by 30%, and you get less cards than you do in a draft pack. And so they're even more expensive than set booster boxes were, which were even more expensive than that. But the only answer they have is to try and find ways to extract more money for less product. They tried it with Aftermath, but found out that 5-card sets don't work. So what are they going to do next? Try a 10-card set and give it some other kind of name? Are they going to change the idea of the Universe Beyond boosters that are coming with Assassin's Creed? Those are 7-card boosters that were done under Aftermath, where you're basically going to pay $1 a card. So what I'm trying to say is the only way for them to extract more money that I can see is to crank the prices continually. Every new set, you have to move the price up a little bit to get people used to a new floor. But then you also have to spike it with other products. So stuff like Modern Horizons 3, where you have these huge price jumps, and at the same time Wizards is going, hey, it'd be a shame if you couldn't get any Modern Horizons 3 collector Commander decks. Yeah, I know we shoved Commander into a Modern set, but that's just because you guys won't pay what it costs for a Modern deck. Like, you have to understand, Rosewater is literally saying people won't pay enough for Modern decks, which is Wizards' arrogance about the secondary market. So they have game stores going, they're telling the game stores, you have to order this much Thunder Junction, or we can't guarantee you'll get any of that sweet Modern Horizons 3 stuff. So they're literally putting game stores in a headlock while lying and saying the game stores are having the time of their life. And they're trying to bamboozle distributors by goosing the numbers through game stores, going, buy this stuff or we won't let you get this stuff in a brand new way. So ultimately, the only thing I can see left for them to do is shoot the prices to the moon. Anyways, I'm wiped out, man. I've said everything I've got to say. Thanks for coming and listening. Big shout out to my patrons. I need to go and have a lie down. If I'm feeling better, I'll be doing a Magic News live stream tonight over on my other channel. I'll leave a link in the description. If we don't do it tonight, we'll do it tomorrow. But either way, I'm out. Have a good one, my friends.